From Kurtco Media.
Turns out this is CSX 2001.
No kidding.
Yeah, so this is
So
it.
This is the kissing cousin.
Yeah. So people always want to know, like, what's the CSX number?
Sure.
So that is the very first one.
That's
the very first Cobra ever to race in any kind.
Hello and welcome to Cars That Matter. I'm your host, Robert Ross. On this week's episode, Bruce Meyer reveals his dedication to collecting race winners and the process behind preserving memories. Well, this is Robert Ross. Welcome to another episode of Cars That Matter. I am here with Bruce at his car collection, and this is about as civilized a car venue as one could possibly imagine. You know, if you ever go up to Napa, it's kind of like the most beautiful Napa wineries designed by Howard Backen meets Car Garage. I mean, you've really done an incredible job here curating the space. You know, the place is so tastefully appointed, and it reflects your sensibilities, Bruce.
Every car in here has a story.
Right.
And that means a lot to me. It's not just another one of those, but it has a story to it.
Well, Bruce, you were talking about how every one of these cars has meaning. I see a thread that connects so many of them. That's obviously the competition cars. I mean, look at these. These cars have numbers on them. Well, numbers generally go with a racetrack. And in this case, the numbers go with Le Mans.
I'm a big fan of competition cars because most everything in here has competition history. And I think out of competition is bred innovation. And so much of the technology that we enjoy today came from racing. Whether it's tire technology or fuels, it really came from racing and fine-tuning and getting the most out of what you have. In the world of motorsport, Le Mans is the World Cup, Olympic Games, Super Bowl of motorsport.
I mean, where else can a guy go 220 miles an hour, in the dark, in the rain? I mean, it's a place that just challenges every aspect of man and machine.
It's awesome. We have, I think, 6 Le Mans winners in here. When I say winner, I mean a car that won its category. You know, we have behind us is a 910 Porsche that finished in the top 10 at Le Mans.
Oh.
That's the first prototype Porsche made because Porsche was running. They were running for class victories in the 1.5 liter and 2 liter, and they were doing rather well. That particular car ran in the 2 liter class, finished in the top 10 overall, and won its category. But for the history of Porsche, it's been run by the Porsches and the PX.
Right.
And PX was very race-oriented, and he was the father of these prototypes, like
That's
the
right.
910.
That's right.
And around the end of the 60s, early 70s, their board decided, we're winning with prototypes. There's that expression, win on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Sell on Monday.
But you can win in a 917, you can win in a 910, but it doesn't drive much.
You can't sell one.
You can't sell one. So that's when in 1971, they decided that the families were going to step aside and get management that was not within the family. And that's when they hired Furman, and he became the head of Porsche.
And all of a sudden,
he wanted to develop profile cars, people that would recognize the car.
Well, you've got a few of those in here.
Yeah,
it's called a 911.
It's called a 911, exactly. So what they decided to do, in order to go profile racing, they had to homologate the 911, and along came the 73 RS.
73 RS.
But that was a 2.7, a little different suspension, a little lighter. They had to make 500 of these to homologate it, and it was so popular, they never dreamt they would sell 1,500.
That's right. That's right. They did the touring and the sport versions. And
That's
the sport
right.
versions are the ones that I guess everybody really, really wants. Frankly, I'd take anything.
You know what? I've had them both.
Yeah.
And I'd take either one.
Well, and you've got a heck of a, this is an RSR behind you.
Yeah, so they made 1,500 RSs. And I think this is right, about 200 of them were what they call lightweights, the sport version.
Right.
And then they made 50 RSRs. And then they produced 17 what they call RSHs, which were homologation cars, which were pulled right off the factory line, went right to the FIA to be homologated.
Right.
So I guess in the pecking order, the rarest would be the RSH, and then the RSR, then the lightweight, and then the touring. All of them are rare, by the way. They're all fabulous.
That's right.
So that was in 73. So now they built this car, and the early RSRs were called R models. They made 8 of them. And these were prototypes that the factory developed for certain venues, like for Daytona and for Targa Florio and for Trans Am. And so they were specialized cars.
Everyone had its own characteristics to suit the track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So along came Daytona. That was the very first race. And what's interesting, the two R cars were Brumos and Penske. And Brumos was owned by Peter Gregg, who was also known as Peter Perfect. Right. So he would take a car he would take a race car right from Porsche, disassemble the whole thing, analyze every piece, make sure everything was tightened down. Because, he was a very, very unusual man and very talented.
Yeah.
He found that the clutch assembly, the clutch and the flywheel had a flaw. He was kind enough to reach out to Penske and said, mind that flywheel. And Penske thought, I'm too smart for that. Porsche built just a fine car, left it alone. Of course, their flywheel went away.
Right.
Hurley and Peter Gregg won Daytona.
Is that right?
So that was Daytona. The next one was Sebring. And they were supposed to get a special car for Sebring. Didn't come in time, but Brumos had delivered a yellow car to a doctor. And they talked the doctor into saying, look, we need the car for Sebring. So the doctor, Hurley, and Penske, I think the doctor drove an hour and the other two guys drove.
Made up the difference.
Made up the difference.
Yeah.
So now they've won Sebring, and the next race was Targa Florio.
And that was still a 2.7 liter car?
Yes. Well, they
bored them out?
Well, it was, I think you could go up to 3, so they called it a 3 liter, but it's 2.7, 3-ish. But they win overall at Targa Florio with a Martini car. This is a factory car. Now they've won Daytona, Sebring, Targa, and the next big race is Le Mans. So Porsche builds a special car for Le Mans, R7, which we have in the garage here. And that was the factory entry for Le Mans in 1973. Porsche is very strategic. When they would build an RSR, they would sell them to privateers. Because they want, in other words, they're not going to run all factory effort cars.
No, they want somebody else to pay for it, and they want the exposure.
100%. So, they came out with this Martini car for Le Mans in 1973. Also, Kremer had an RSR, Luge, 2 or 3 other privateer teams. And they saw this Martini car and they said, bullshit. That is not a production RSR. So to make a long story short, they protested, and the factory had to run that car as a prototype.
Oh, is that right?
Because when you look at the wheels, it's got 917 wheels. It's got what's called a Mary Stuart back end, which is Mary Stuart was Queen of Scots, so she had always a high collar.
Yeah.
So that car was unique, and the privateer said, I'm sorry.
It looks like a 911, but no other 911.
Right.
Yeah.
So they got booted out from RSR production to prototype. And that car won 4th overall behind 2 Matras and a Ferrari. And it beat a lot of the prototypes. And that car is wicked fast and really famous.
I can well imagine.
So now they've won Daytona, Sebring, Targa, and Le Mans. And now what's next? In the U.S., we had a series called Trans Am.
Sure.
The Pontiacs, Camaros, Corvettes,
Mustangs. Oh, what a fabulous Javelin. Everything ran in that series.
Javelin, yeah.
Remember? I mean,
So Porsche built the car behind us, the number 59 car, for Peter Gregg to contest Trans Am. Now, I don't think, best I can tell, they expected to win it overall because, they're running against big thumping V8s.
Those were big 5-liter motors.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they were all out of the skunk works. They were pretty special.
Yeah, they weren't just 5 liters.
They were built up cars. So Hurley and Peter Gregg, lo and behold, win the championship, the whole series in that car behind us. Then they go ahead and they win IMSA. So that in 1973, this is the first year of their RSR, they win all those races plus IMSA and Trans Am. That was a big deal.
Boy, that's beyond a hat trick. That's like just sort of taking it all, not leaving anything for anybody else.
Yeah.
And obviously, it put the 911 on the map. I mean, it was an interesting car when it was introduced 10 years earlier, but by that time, it really became a legend. And of course, it's still sort of rests on those laurels, I think.
Isn't it something?
It's amazing, really, because it was a whole different industry, though. I mean, it certainly didn't have the kind of factory support, sophistication, computer technology, all the stuff we have today. This was guys like building this stuff on a drafting table and in the machine shop and just making it perfect.
That's right.
Another one over here is your Shelby Cobra.
Yeah.
Tell us about that one. That was at Le Mans.
Sure. Okay,
That was a qualifier, is that right?
So when somebody says I have a Cobra, the first thing you ask them is what's the CSX number?
Right.
Because every Cobra is like the birthmark.
That's
right.
right.
If it's CSX2 or a CSX3, it was built in period by Cobra.
That's
but
right.
If it's CSX4, 6, 7, or 8,
right.
It's still a Cobra.
They
but
look the same, but we want some history.
We want some history. So I'm in Retromobile, turn of the century, seems like yesterday.
Yeah. Boy.
But it's been 25 years. And there's an event there called Retromobile.
Sure.
And that very Cobra, which is unique, I mean, there's no other Cobra that looks like that, with the right big flares. They call the fenders wings.
Mm-hmm.
The wings are different. It's kind of a comp-looking thing. And so it's sitting on a fellow stand, Lucas Hooney, who I had bought cars from, and he had sold cars to me. And I thought, now what is that car? It was painted Aston Martin green. What is that doing here? And I said,
that's not usually the French taste. I mean,
it didn't belong.
Some of the weird
what is that
happens at Retromobile.
Yeah.
You don't usually see American race cars.
Absolutely not. I never went with the idea of buying that car. And I was just there, just admiring. And I said, Lucas, what's the story on that car? He said, Bruce, that's the first Cobra. Now I'm thinking to myself, bullshit.
We know who had the first Cobra. And it was
Shelby.
blue, and it was called number 2000.
That's exactly right. So he brings out all this paperwork. Turns out this is CSX 2001.
No kidding.
Yeah. So this is
it.
This
is the kissing cousin.
Yeah. So people always want to know, what's the CSX number?
Sure.
So that is the very first one. That's the very first Cobra ever to race in any kind. It was the first.
Because Carroll's was a demonstration car. It didn't really do much anything. You'd paint it different colors and take it around. And
give it to the magazines.
Yeah.
So that was the first car. Shelby was always underfunded, I'll just say that. So he worked on other people's money.
Right.
So Ed Hughes, who was a well-known race driver, raced at Le Mans, he really bankrolled the first Cobras. If you look at the registry, it says Cobra going to New York, Cobra going to LA Harbor. The ones going to New York went to Ed Hughes.
Okay.
So Ed Hughes takes this car, does R&D on it, races it, sells it to a fellow named Lloyd Lucky Kasner.
Sure.
Lloyd Lucky Kasner was very involved with Maseratis.
That's
was
right.
a good friend of Carroll Shelby's.
Yep.
So as a favor to Carroll, he's taking this car to Le Mans. So I've got pictures of the Le Mans trials. Now, actually, it didn't do badly. It was okay, but it wasn't going to win it. And he didn't go there to be okay.
Right.
So he sells the car to a young Frenchman, Jean-Marie Vincent, who had a lot of money. And he sells this as like the next winning race car. At that point, this was in '64, Shelby had come out with what they call the FIA cars.
Sure.
So Vincent,
they would let you put a suitcase in the back and say
and a notchback door, big wings.
Correspond to all the FIA rules.
Exactly. So Vincent goes to Shelby Racing in Europe and said, turn this into an FIA car, because he wanted to be competitive. So that's why that car looks like an FIA car.
That's why it has
That was done by Shelby Racing of Europe. What's interesting is a friend of mine came to me and said, why don't you restore that back so that it looks like the first Cobra? And I thought, why would I do that? It's so badass looking.
Yeah.
It's like taking a 32 Ford Hot Rod and turning it back into a stock 32. You don't do that. So what we did, we took it to Mike McCluskey, who's a well-known Cobra guy. We stripped it down, absolutely the original body, original chassis.
So this is the original sheet metal on the car?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
And the early cars they had worm and sector steering.
That's right. They didn't go to rack and pinion until later on.
That's right. But when he built the FIA cars, they'd gone to rack and pinion. So Vincent wanted rack and pinion. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you've got to cut the ends off of the chassis. It's not like an afternoon job.
Right.
But they did it the right way. Sterling Moss was very involved with AC cars. Mm-hmm. And so Vincent, through his connections, got to Sterling Moss. Sterling Moss got him the rack and pinion unit, and that car has rack and pinion.
So it drives a lot better too.
Oh yeah, and it's got Webers. It's a full comp car. And then he raced
4
it.
Webers on that.
Oh yeah, he raced that car in 64, 65, and 66.
If that was a second Cobra, it would have had a 260 engine, but I presume it got a 289 once it went to the track or later on in life.
It was born with a 260. That's what they intended to put in it, but the 289 came out right
That's
away.
right.
So why would you waste your time with it? You just went with the 289.
Right.
So when it went to Europe, it was a 289. And then when it got done with Ford Racing of Europe, it had a 289 with Webers, full comp motor.
Nice.
And he did rather well. I mean, he won a lot of races.
Really?
Jean-Marie, yeah. And another nice thing about this car for me is that, a Tesla goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
Sure.
This is probably 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
And you think it's 2.
Yeah,
You're driving this car, you're going 60 miles an hour, and the wind's in your face, and they're making all kinds of racket, and you're just real happy. Yeah.
That was a rocket ship. You got some other American rocket ships here too that were at Le Mans. I see a couple of Corvettes over there that are just, they're kind of sandwiched the whole Corvette era. You got the great grandfather and you have the.
Right. So, I mean, being a patriotic American, I wanted to get something in here that represented what I love. And that 60 Corvette was one of 3 cars that Briggs Cunningham put in 1960. First time a Corvette had ever raced at Le Mans.
That's why the white and the blue, those were America's colors, and those were his colors.
Precisely. So that was one of 3. The one next to it is CompuWare. That was Herb Fischel decided that he was going to take Chevrolet racing back in the late 90s. And they developed that through Pratt & Miller, developed that Corvette. That car won its category at Le Mans, which was GT1, which in other words, you have prototypes, and the next up is GT1. That is a badass car. And that won Le Mans in 2009 and has never been restored. Still has the Le Mans map on it.
And it still has the Le Mans dirt on it, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, that's right fresh from Le Mans.
That is fantastic. Bruce, how do you get a car like that?
So I've always liked those yellow cars with the American flag on it. So I went looking, and there's a fellow named Chip Miller, who was a big Corvette guy, Corvettes at Carlisle, and his son Lance. I said, Lance, I want to find a CompuWare, one of those yellow Corvettes with the big American flag on it. So he put me in touch with this guy, and the guy had one. And what happens is Corvette would race, CompuWare and Pratt Miller would race, and they turned over to privateers in Europe, and they would race on it. So they found one, but then it was raced by somebody else. It hadn't won its category, but I thought, it's still plenty cool. So I bought it, and then like the next month, I'm at Amelia Island, and I saw Lance, and I said, I love my Corvette. I'm going to get it restored. Pratt Miller's going to restore it for me. I mean, I'd still like to get one that ran Le Mans. And he said, see that guy sitting at the table? He has the Le Mans winner, like the most famous of all. So I went over to that guy in the corner, who was just not a car guy.
How do you get one?
Some guys buy and sell, and he was one of those guys. He was smart enough to buy it right at Le Mans. They took it right from Le Mans to his warehouse. It had sat there for 3 years. He didn't know what to do with it.
No kidding.
So I was at the right place. I bought it from him, and then I sold the other car to Charlie Nierberg. And now we've had that on the track. Dan Binks was the crew chief. And if you ask Dan, he was the crew chief for the whole winning, CompuWare, Pratt Miller series, really. And he said that's his favorite car. That car has won more races than any other Corvette on planet Earth.
Is that right?
It just turned out that way, and Dan Binks still talks about it. So I sent the car to Dan Binks the time he was at Michigan, and of course he's like clean. He said, I can fix that up, look perfect. I said, don't touch the cosmetics, but make it mechanically as good as you can. So he did, and then we brought it out. We ran it at thermal. By the way, that's got power steering and air conditioning.
Well, a whole different way of racing. Way racing evolved, didn't it?
And that's the last with the stick shifter, basically sequential.
Yeah.
And my son Evan, who's a way better driver than me, he drove that car and he knows how to drive sequential. I mean, you don't just go at it kind of part way. Like with me, if it doesn't want to go into gear, it's just fine. I'll find another gear. We're so respectful of what it is. But if you're a racer, you just get in,
because somebody else will fix it.
Yeah, somebody else. And so Evan just got in that thing and he just turned some hot laps.
And you were so lucky that nobody ever decided to take a hose to it. I mean, there's just something magical about having that, Le Mans dust.
Yeah.
So you got Corvettes back to back, old and new,
Mhm.
tons of Porsches here, every one that matters. There's a funny red car over there that most people won't know anything about. It happens
Right.
to be my favorite Italian car
Ooh,
ever
good.
made. Bizzarini, what could be better, especially the Le Mans winner.
So what's interesting is, I'm really happy to hear you say it because people out there know he is a connoisseur. He knows his stuff. And I took that to Jay's. Jay drove that car, and he said, "Bruce, this is my favorite car."
And
so
that's
that is
one of the most important ones.
that is the most important car. Never been restored. It would be like Dr. Porsche, Enzo Ferrari, and Giotto Bizzarini if Bizzarini had been a better businessman and not such a hothead. He built that car, drove it to Le Mans, finished in the top 10, won its class, and he drove it back. And then he sold it to an American, Remington Olstad, who had it for a year, I think, in Rome, in front of his cafe to attract attention. Then it went to a famous, I think it's Violati collection in Milan for 30 years. So that car's never been restored. It's the real. I took the engine out. It's got a 327. I've got it in a crate. And we put another 327 in there because
That
we
was
run
its
in the
original
street.
engine. Huh?
Yeah, I still got the original engine.
The Le Mans winner, the
Yeah,
Le Mans engine. Amazing.
It's a sublime sound. I just love that thing.
Well, there's nothing better than mixing a Chevrolet, a Chevy small block with Italy's most beautiful car. I mean, it was designed by Giugiaro in 1963, and I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
I'm with you.
I mean, it doesn't get any better. It doesn't get much lower either. Somebody thinks a GT40 is low. That thing's just about as low.
Oh, no, that's just like knee height.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is one of the design, what I thought was a design flaw, turned out to be like what I didn't know. The sides of that car are flat.
Right.
So Pete Brock was here, and I said, Pete, why did he just drop those sides down? Why didn't he give it a little contour? Because you look at the picture of Le Mans, every car had this beautiful contour to it. He said, Bruce, you don't understand. I go, what don't I understand? He said, that is the very first car. Bizzarini was a savant. And it's the first car that had slab sides to keep the air from going under and giving it lift. He said, Bruce, after 65 at Le Mans, every single car had slab sides. They figured it out. And the GT40s, what's interesting, I had Gurney here. I was telling Gurney the story. So I went back to Gurney's shop. He had the Le Mans winning 67 there, the red one. And he showed me where they added panels to give it the slab sides.
No kidding.
Because he said they got damaged at Goodwood, and so when they had to take the panel off, and the number one was still under.
Is that
in the old when it was contoured.
right? So they actually just extended them flat.
So he did the cam back. They said that if Bizzarini had stayed at Ferrari, is what a 65 GTO would look like.
Right. Kind of like almost like the bread van turned into that.
Right.
Yeah.
The guy he knew his stuff.
What an incredible car. And of course he designed the Lamborghini V12 engine too.
That's right.
So I mean he could
He knew his stuff.
but he used the Chevrolets because they were all he could afford.
Yeah.
And let's face it, back then I'd put a 327 Chevy up against anything from Italy just in terms of reliability. They made the same power, they had more torque. I mean, it was, one carburetor and you're done. Of course, that's probably got 4 Webers on it.
It's got 4 of those side draft Webers.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right.
Oh, those are really, really, really amazing cars. It's just kind of the cream of the crop. It's all here.
I've been very lucky but so every one of these just kind of came along and appealed to me. The car behind us in the corner is my Bonneville car.
Well, I was looking at that when I came in.
So
here. Now, that's a 200-mile-an-hour car.
It is.
You have the credentials to prove it.
I do.
Bruce, let me ask you about the Petersen. I know you're a founder, and today it really is the premier West Coast, maybe American Automotive Museum. I mean, it's an incredible place. Talk about a legacy. I mean, did you know that it would sort of achieve this prominence when it was founded?
Never in my wildest dreams. Petersen found this whole city block. So Petersen just seized the opportunity, bought the whole block for like a bargain price.
At the right price.
So he thought, well, this will be a great car museum. And that museum is so well functioning. It just is fabulous.
That's right.
And that starts with Terry. He really turned that thing around.
And they've done some real interesting community outreach that, brings in not just your traditional car enthusiasts, but people who might not ordinarily walk into museum doors. And that to me is kind of the neat part about it.
100%. You can go in there, you'll see every ethnicity, every gender, every age. I defy you ever to go in there and not see diversity and people that are coming to see that museum. It's been twice selected as the world's finest automobile museum. The lowrider exhibit is one of the biggest we've ever had.
That was some of the biggest gate they got, isn't it?
Fabulous, yes. And what's interesting is, with the lowrider community, it's a community. It's not just like, oh, there's my 64 Chevy and it can bounce and that. These cars are built by families.
Yeah.
We have the largest exhibit of lowriders ever assembled anywhere on planet Earth, and it has been hugely successful. So we are educating, and that's a big part of our mission today: education and learning trades.
Well, we're going to need somebody to fix those Weber carburetors.
Right, and there's always going to be a job for somebody that knows how to work on Webers.
I mean, these cars are like Swiss watches. I mean, they've got a lot of moving parts, and there's some very delicate things, and there's a lot of history that someone has to understand to be able to maintain these old beasts. Bruce, what was your first car?
Well, it depends what first car means, because first of all, this is in my DNA. I loved hot rods. I grew up on Hot Rod magazine. So I was always dreaming about a 40 Ford or a 32 Ford. That was going to be my first car. And I've always worked, because that was what drove our family.
Absolutely.
When I turned 16, I wanted to get a 40 Ford, because that's what a buddy of mine had bought.
Sure.
He paid $50 for his. I had located one for $100. I could afford it, but my parents forbid it.
Really?
Because that's just, hot rod.
Too rambunctious.
Too rambunctious. So my great aunt died and left my sister, who was 3.5 years older, and I her 50 Plymouth.
Okay.
So I did the best I could.
Well,
I painted it Sierra Gold, which was a 56 or 57 Chevy color, and put the Plymouth moon disc on it, and anyways, blah blah blah. It wasn't that impressive, but it got me through.
It got your blood going, though.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky to be able to come in here and see these cars too, especially to have a friendship that goes back so many years.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce.
Good. Anytime.
And now for Garage Gold. Deciding on the first car for your collection is a big decision, but this would be a great place to start. Chevrolet built a remarkable sweet spot in the Corvette lineup from 2010 to 2013 for the last few years of the C6 model line. It was called the Grand Sport. It bridged the gap between the base model and the track-focused Z06. The Grand Sport had the same 430 horsepower LS3 engine as the base Vet, but with some suspension and chassis bits from the Z06, including larger tires, bigger brakes. It was available as a coupe or a convertible. The Grand Sport really saved its hottest setup for the coupe with a manual transmission, which also included a dry sump oiling system for the LS3 engine and a differential cooler. Expect to pay $28,000 to $48,000 for a decent coupe and a little more for a convertible. Thanks for listening. Join me next time for my conversation with Jay Leno. Cars That Matter is a Kurtco Media production. I'm your host, Robert Ross. The show is produced by Bill Curtis and Stuart Halperin, with audio and video production by Ness Smith-Sabadoff, and additional support from Melody Larson, Lindsay Davis, Deborah Smith, and AJ Mosley. To listen to more episodes of Cars That Matter, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like this episode, be sure to rate us 5 stars to help other listeners discover the show. For exclusive video episodes, visit Hemmings.com/Cars That Matter.
From Kurtco Media.